Good evening and welcome to the August 27th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will take a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda. I'd like to actually...
Hold on, Alan's going to...
I move we approve the agenda with moving action item 11 up to discussion.
Second.
It is moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Rosser. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Director Perez, will you please read the mission statement?
The mission of the Ames Community Schools is to ensure that all learners develop the knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and personal esteem necessary to grow in and shape a changing society.
Thank you very much. And I will go ahead and read our statement on public discussion and public forum. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And the first item on the agenda has been moved up from action items, and it's closing open enrollment for the 2018-19 year in specific grades and buildings. And I'm going to go ahead and let Superintendent Reisner give us a description of what we're talking about and why we have amended the agenda.
Sure. We, as we've talked about in other meetings this year, board meetings, we had a large increase in our enrollment that was not anticipated, causing some overcrowding in the buildings and the need for us to look at different ways to get our kids to other buildings that had classrooms. Through the process, we have a number of areas that are full, but we have decided that we will go ahead and work on an individual basis at this point, because there's just kind of a sense that the communication around this has been confusing, both I think for the board and for staff and parents. And so right now we're going to leave it as is, and then as we talked about before, we will address this as we go through the year through some work sessions and looking at different ways to approach our enrollment and how we do our open enrollment.
Questions from anyone?
I guess one follow-up question. I mean, we're not taking any action on it, so this won't affect any students that have open enrolled thus far already or that are already in the district. I mean, we're going to be talking about that as we go forward and how to protect them once they're already in the district, right?
Correct. Yep.
I'm curious because I saw the numbers from the first day of enrollment, and if I'm reading it correctly, it looked like there was at least one kindergarten class, I think it was at Mitchell, that had 33 kids in a class. Did I read that correct?
No, I'm not aware of any kindergarten class with 33 kids.
So if I'm looking at the numbers and we're looking at Mitchell.
Oh, we added a section.
So there's 66 kindergartners at Mitchell, and the numbers I had for Monday say there were 2 classrooms. Now there's going to be 3 classrooms?
There's 3 classrooms.
Okay. So, but even if you look at all of that particular situation and all the numbers, I mean, they're all really quite high.
They are.
So what is your strategy about class size moving forward until we communicate it? Like, is your plan that we will do a work session where we get some clarity and then we state?
Yes, I believe we'll do several work sessions around this. One, the number that we go on is just kind of a number that nobody really knows who came up with the number.
What number?
The number that we say before the section is, or sections are closed.
And what is that? I don't know that.
Well, if you look at it, it says, it's over in the,
This would be an example.
yep, so 100, if you look over at Meeker, it'll say third grade, 9. So like 9 open slots out of 100. So we established that number based on the room, either classrooms or teaching staff. This is where there's some breakdown because I think that before we were able to do it, I'm speaking before my time, but I believe that we didn't have the large numbers that we now have, and so they were able to do it more on a year-by-year basis where they were looking at, you know, this is the anticipated amount, we're going to need 3 teachers, and we may have 4 classrooms in that area, so if the numbers increase, we're able to hire another teacher and we have a classroom. Now we're getting up to where we're, you know, pushing the limit on 1 space, but 2, those numbers, we decided those numbers. So that's saying that in 2nd grade, we'll have 4 classes of 25. So at some point, somebody decided on that number at 25. And that's just the number that historically we've gone with. That's not necessarily something that we've had a lot of discussion around. Or I don't believe you that have been on the board. I mean, I'm month 2, so.
So if I understand what you're saying, we're not going, we were talking last meeting about capping open enrollment, and you're saying that it's really a big decision and we want to have lots of conversation and give our families time to understand what we're going to do, but in the interim, are you saying that we're still going to be adding people up to 25 per, like, I'm not sure what we're doing in the interim.
Right now, that's what we're doing. I mean, right now, that's what we are doing and what we have been doing. So those numbers have not changed. So that 100, that number 100, that shows 9 openings.
So even if a family calls tomorrow, and we had 1 spot left, we would say yes to that family?
Yes. Now, are you talking about, so the only people that can open enroll at this point are families that have already been here?
Right. Yes, no, I understand.
Okay, so those kids are already counted in this.
Right. But if we get a family that has 10 kids move into the district,
then we have to look for open
they
spaces.
would probably not all be able to go to the same school, or
That could happen.
hypothetically speaking, but, I mean, that's kind of what I'm just trying to understand.
That could happen.
I understand about needing to give the community time to understand, but I also don't want to put us in the position to just continue making a bad situation worse, and I think that's just my concern.
Right.
Historically, we've always tried to keep 25 as the benchmark for no more than kids in the classroom. We just talked about putting it actually in board policy, but elected not to provide administration some flexibility in that. So sometimes we've gone above that. With previous administration would provide EAs to help support that. So I agree with Jenny, you know, enrollment within our district is blossoming, so we need to make sure we're strategically careful of how kids are being allocated to different buildings. So I'm encouraged about where we're going, but I think the flexibility is needed at this point.
And I think the chances that if you look at the numbers, for instance, there's room in the district for a number more students. So it would be hard to believe we'd fill all of those slots when you count. But definitely it could be that a family moves in and they are going to a different school than what's in their neighborhood, but that's occurring now.
Right, and so it's your understanding then that there's not a classroom in the district that has more than 25 kids per classroom?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, that's what I was missing.
Because if you look at the numbers on the sheet, do you have them current?
I do.
Okay, if you look at those numbers, we will go over enrollment by 1 or 2 kids, maybe 3 kids even, if we're trying to keep a family together in the same building.
And it looks like Sawyer might have one that has 27. It looks like maybe the largest right now is 27 at Sawyer, and there's a couple with 26 at other schools.
And it's hard, this is from the first day of school, so I hate to, you know, for teachers that are watching saying, wait a minute, I have more than that in my room, or I have less than that. Please understand, this is day one. So there's the potential that kids have not come, that moved, and we don't know that they moved, so classes could be less. There's also the potential that numbers have changed because kids have moved in since the first day, and that has happened. So it could go both ways, that we've had some kids leave us, which we've had, and we've also had some additional kids move in. So these are as good as the first day.
Okay, so maybe at next meeting or October
Sure.
1st, when we have the final counts, we can review that again.
Sure,
And take
yep.
a look.
Absolutely.
So going forward, just to clarify, as I actually said 2 weeks ago, this is just day one, like you just said. And we also have families who move to the community where they might be moving from a state that doesn't start school until after Labor Day. So for them, you know, they don't, you know, it can impact our district differently. So going forward in our workshops that you're talking about doing, we're going to start looking at that standard that's been used in the past regarding 25. And possibly looking at whether that's the right number to have, especially when it pertains to particular grades like kindergarten, first grade, second grade. You know, is 25 the right number, or should it be lower? Is that the discussion that we're going to have going forward
Yes.
and prepare for next year?
Yep, and I think it'll be important during those work sessions to also have the principals there and the directors too, so we can all kind of be at the same table and have those discussions.
Okay.
Yep.
I think the thing that I would say to the public, which is why I asked Jerry to put this up, this is a real challenge every school year. It's been, and I'm looking at some of our teachers and principals saying yes, and I know, because some of it's the dynamics of our community, and so I appreciate the willingness for us to be able to sit down and really take a look at this and see, is there a better way we can do this so that we don't have this situation where a family moves into, let's say, Fellows, and they have twin third graders, right? We see that there's, that's a full section right now. So my point is that I think that we need to, I really just want the community to be aware that we're really trying to do what's best for our kids, our teachers, our staff members, and how we manage our enrollment. I think the other thing to note is that open enrollment continues to be a great opportunity for our school district. And you can look at the way those numbers have changed and what a wonderful opportunity that has provided us, because as those kids come to us, so does the money that comes with them, and that allows us to continue to support the programs that we desire. So I'm pleased and supportive of the direction that we're going, and I appreciate that we've had these discussions. So thank you for leading us through them. So thank you. Do we have anybody else up here? Sorry, I don't want to.
I have one more thought. I'm wondering, because I know I'm really looking forward to the work sessions and looking forward to being able to sit down with administration and the principals. I'm wondering if there's a space for teacher voice in this conversation, and you know, how they might be brought into the discussion just to help us understand from a different perspective.
One of the structures that we are going to propose to the principals, probably like in a month or so, is and I've talked a little bit with them about this already, but is the idea of their building level leadership teams and doing some groups. I think I've talked to you all about that as well, so that we have that building level leadership team that is representative of a number of teachers, and some of the buildings I think already have that in place, but then it's the principals or the principal and a teacher leader bringing that back to us, that information back to the district level team. So we'll work on that structure and making sure that it's in place as we move into some of these difficult conversations about structure and things.
And I think it would be important to have Darcy in these conversations with the special ed piece of it, because if I'm understanding correctly, if if the students, they go to special ed, there is the discretion of the director, is that correct?
Darcy, you can speak to that.
So let's say they're full, what do?
Okay, I know. Is there room in that building in third grade? And what are our special ed numbers? We look first at third grade and do almost everything we can to keep them in that building. If it's really disproportional and we have a lot more room in the other, then we do switch to the other building. But yes, as we think.
And Jerry is going to put up for me, as you're all aware, we had our work session. Was that last meeting? I can't remember when we had our work session with our architects.
I think it was our last
2 weeks ago, possibly, and really had some great discussions with the architects and Story Construction on where we are. As you hopefully recall, there were 4 things requests from the board that came out of that. A request for us to, all of us to look at the enrollment number and making sure that we've got the 1,600 for academic space, 1,800 for common spaces, if that's where we want to make sure that we are. Second thing was addressing parking concerns and what is that going to look like. Third thing is safety and ensuring that how is safety as a core value brought into that schematic design. And the fourth thing, and I just wanted to have Jerry put the dates up in front of you to make sure that we, so Jerry's put it up, so the, you'll see the 28th, so that information will be submitted to the Story Construction for estimating. The 5th of September, we will be having a community progress update session, and really felt that was important because there's lots of exciting things happening over the summer since the last that the community was brought in with the programming. So that will be next Wednesday at 5:30 here in the district office. The 10th then is when we come back and we will have our discussion with the architects and Story Construction. There's a steering committee, and then the dinner would be on the 20th. Need, as we are at this point in the process. We just really wanted to open that opportunity so that we can provide them that.
To provide some guidance to us that we not enter into an agreement with ACAC for the operating side or that lease until we've approved the schematic design. So we need to make sure that we're moving forward prior to doing that. So we continue to meet with ACAC. We're encouraged about the direction we're going, but we don't recommend bringing forward a document that actually has a lease in front of us to outline specifically what's happening. But again, we can talk about the pool more specifics if people have concerns or questions. Again, let Lisa had.
Is this work session just a report from OPN? What is this work session?
My understanding was from the takeaway from the last OPN session that we had was we were going to do kind of a time that community could come and we would give them a progress update. That would be on the 5th at 5:30. And then following that, so not following that same night, but then the 10th, we would have OPN come one more time and kind of answer some of the questions that this group might have prior to then the 24th when we would take a vote.
That the board would have.
That the board would have, yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. The idea was to be able to give the presentation to the school board ahead of time, 2 weeks ahead of time, so that we aren't just bringing the schematic design, plopping it out in front of you and saying, you want to approve this. So we want to be able to present to you. They'll go through and give us the progress, kind of a little reflection on the meeting schedule that we've had and what we've done and some of the epiphanies that we've arrived at to be able to come with the design. And the schematic design, we finally get something down on paper. So this is really a big first step, but it's still pretty initial or early in the stages of the project.
So they'll come and give a presentation, they'll bring us up to speed with various committees that have been meeting since the last discussion. And will those 4 items that Alyssa just referred to be addressed at that time?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
So I have several questions about the project, mostly relating to the pool, quite frankly. I see that, I guess, tomorrow we're due for a cost estimate, because I think, tomorrow's the 28th?
It's been submitted.
It'll take them a couple weeks to put the estimate together. Right now, OPN has assembled all the documents, and then they'll deliver those to Story Construction, and then they'll start preparing their cost estimate.
When will we know how much it's going to cost?
This would be by the 20th. It'll be they're
So
basically going to confirm what the previous budget was, or they'll adjust it based on the information and the ebb and flow of information that have come back from the user groups towards the design team.
So we're going to have a work session, so we're going to have a public forum, and then we're going to have a work session, and we still don't know how much anything costs.
Right, not quite. I couldn't answer yes or no to that question. I'm not trying to be argumentative, other than we've got a budget based on the program.
Right.
And so the schematic design is going to work to kind of narrow that. We're kind of like falling down the funnel. Mm-hmm. And so as we get closer with more detail, more information, the budget's going to come up and become tighter too.
Well, that's good, because my concerns have always been, not so much about the high school, because I feel like that's limited in some way by the bond, right? The pool has always been kind of this Wild West piece of the story, and I always feel like we've always been saying, well, we're going to come back and talk about it, we're going to come back and talk about it, and now suddenly it's time to approve the schematics. I admit to being surprised when I saw it on when we had the work session 2 weeks ago, because it was there, like we had all just agreed that's what it was going to look like. I have never really understood the pool, what it's going to cost, who's going to pay for it, because I understand it is fundamentally different than the agreement we had with the city, and so I'm still not clear on the cost that we're thinking about moving forward with, and from my understanding, they're quite significant. So is there any way that we can know who's paying for what? What are we committing to? Where's that money coming from? Last I heard, we're talking about $200,000 a year to buy chemicals for the swimming pool.
I'd like to correct you.
Please do.
We sat in this room last winter, and very clearly on that board talked about what we're going to go to the community to ask for the new high school.
Right?
The additions for the elementary school.
Yeah.
And we made a conscious decision with everybody sitting at this table that we were going to use the save
dollars
tax
for a pool, not a $20 million pool. I'm thinking like an $8 million pool, right? And I think that's the
actually, we weren't
conversation.
talking about numbers. We weren't talking about numbers at the time. The general number that was used was based on the Linmar pool, which in 2012 was built at a $12 million amount. Story Construction has added a inflationary cost of building to that, and that's where the $18 million figure has come from. Now, are we building? Do I think we're building the Linmar pool? No, especially based in maybe you can shed some light on what changes have already been suggested. I don't think we're going to build that pool.
Okay.
So I don't think it's going to cost anywhere near that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this discussion and bringing up the costs right now is very unfair to Story Construction, our architects. They need time to do their work. It's way premature to start talking about these numbers until they actually present them.
Well, I mean, I guess that's my
let's
point.
get them,
I mean,
and then we'll talk.
that's my point. If we're going to have a work session and there was a question on the floor about what we want to know, I want to know what it's going to cost. I've been hearing numbers thrown out, they get a little bigger every time, and no, you didn't, I'm really good at taking notes, I know what I hear, and I feel like I'm constantly being told, no, that's not what you heard. I want to know what it's going to cost, who's going to pay for it, where that money is going to come from.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate you bringing up those questions, Monique. And
who's going to use it?
Okay, and so, and I think that when we talk about costs, I think there's two, I put them in my mind columns. There's the operational costs.
Right, that's really my concern.
And then there's the capital costs.
Absolutely.
In building this.
I'm really more focused on the operational costs.
Okay, and I appreciate that because that's information that we can say, okay, so Jerry, we've got questions about operational costs, how that's going to be paid for, who's going to pay for it. I can tell you, and I don't have, is that the document? Do you want to link it? You can just say it. Luke's got the document that lays out the operational costs.
So I think what we can provide the board is the historical numbers for the last 10 years for the operations of the pool in the current arrangement. Dr. Taylor, back in 2016, provided a summary of what he feels is the best estimate of that operating cost going forward based upon the Linn-Mar model with City of Ames rates. And so for the stretch 25 that we're looking at doing, it was costing $149,823. Again, this is in 2016. So we were conservative, and based upon that estimate, we were saying, okay, between $150,000 and $200,000 is a pretty good estimate of what it would cost to operate. So 200 being conservative is always the number I was shooting for. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, what can we go out to ACAC and then also the City of Ames to have people come together to build this facility. But I think we can provide this information and the historical information. The other thing I think we could maybe, Jerry asked Story to do is that they could focus on the pool. Maybe there could be some kind of update and anticipation for the 10th. They might not have the whole work done, but if we could have a better idea for the capital costs that we talked about, maybe we could have that as well.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you.
I guess that for me, because I'm not pro-pool, I'm not anti-pool, I really just don't understand the pool. I just don't understand the money, and I guess I feel like I don't know if Story can answer the questions I have about who's going to pay for this pool and how much it's going to cost. And so I feel like the board owes the community some information that can be actually useful for the 5th and for the 10th. Is there a way to get something? I mean, we're talking about, we just spent 30 minutes talking about not having enough seats for our children, and we can't build more buildings because we don't have math music teachers, but yet somehow we're thinking about spending $200,000 on chemicals for a pool. I just don't understand it. And so the board needs to be able to provide that clarity, not only to the rest of us, but to the community, so that when they come on the 5th, they can ask real questions, so that when we sit down on the 10th, we can ask real questions. And I get the sense that there's maybe some knowledge community-wide here, and so I would like that to be made available to everybody so that we can all engage in a really clear understanding about how we are choosing to spend the community's money.
So to be fair, we've been hesitant to push things out to the community prior to bringing it to the board. So if you're desiring to have it go out for the 5th, I mean, Elisa and I and administration can put that together as a summary where we're at today.
That seems fair.
Okay, but you're okay pushing that out prior to not being vetted?
I think you are fair to say these are, I don't know, I don't want to say funny numbers, that doesn't sound good. Preliminary numbers, or whatever, right? I feel like we need to be clear, because, I mean, we're not talking about a little bit of money. And my understanding is this money comes out of the general fund that we used to pay teachers. And so I have questions about how much we're committing and frankly how sustainable it is 10 years from now. And so now is the time to ask those questions. And you know, you're talking about a vote of a clear schematic on the 24th. That's not much time to be making $1 million decisions for 40 years.
Sure. So I think if we can provide that document to the board prior to the 5th, the community can consume that, and then it would allow for a couple of weeks to digest that, ask further questions, and then coming on the 10th, we can have a really hard discussion. I think have Principal Evans there to talk about programming, how is it being utilized, how he envisions maybe the program could be increased down the road. And then also the other piece of this that we haven't touched on to a large extent is the community involvement. And I know you've had some thoughts and people provide feedback regarding usage of that facility. So to be honest, I think that's a kind of a gray box for me right now, because I don't know exactly what that participation is with the Healthy Life Center too. So it's kind of out there.
Just to be clear, when you say participation, you mean public access to this facility?
Correct.
You're not clear if the public will have access to this facility right now?
To what extent? We in our discussions with ACAC, we've been very direct in saying we want this as a community facility. And so we need to allow time and space for them to use this pool, but it's trying to figure out what that looks like. We have not actively engaged. I guess you've talked to Parks and Rec a little bit, Jerry, about what they're looking for, but again, it's a little premature for those discussions.
Again, all along, primarily in facilities going back past 2 or 3 years, to about 2-3 years, these discussions regarding operating costs and actually costs of the building have been ongoing. This isn't old, something new. These numbers have been out there for quite a while. I think one of the most updated information, I think, Jerry, if you can you put your finger on some of the suggestions that came out of the user group committee meeting recently? That, when all of the principals and teachers at the high school met, whether they were band directors or talking about theater or other things, they talked about the wants and all the things. And in previous, follow-up meetings to that, then it was kind of narrowed down to, okay, this is what we need. And that's what OPN and Story Construction have been doing with all the groups. The pool user group is also one of those same groups. So can you just rattle through some of the things they talked about and, okay, these are our needs, and how that's going to have they used the term about value engineering, isn't it? And can you explain that value engineering term to the board? So, because I'm kind of have a feeling we're going to be hearing that term as we go forward for the next few months.
Yeah, commonly value engineering is interpreted as a cost reduction approach. If you're going to take the true importance of value engineering, it's an interaction to be able to, as they go through a stage in the design, they're going to review that design with the users and say, is this what you meant when you gave us your big idea? And they're going to say, well, yeah, pretty much we meant this, but we really didn't want or need this. You misinterpreted it and included it in because you thought it was important. But there's a couple of things over here that are really important that we want. So value engineering isn't just cost cutting, but it's providing value back into the project. And there's a kind of a structured approach to being able to do that I've been involved with, and we've been able or successful to add costs and cut costs from the project and still result in more cuts than adds in order to be able to keep the project within budget.
And prioritize certain things in those areas too.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So as you identify each one of these options that are available, we talked about the roof configuration. And if you take advantage of the seating versus the pool, you can slope the roof a little bit more. You have less actual material, physical materials to build the exterior walls. It's a pretty simple, basic, kind of a cost reduction option. Talked about a pool liner versus a concrete basin, fixed versus movable bulkheads, controlling the height with the sloped roof, eliminating one of the dreams or big wishes was a 3-meter diving board, which isn't used in high school competition. We also, by doing that, then it not only eliminates that 3-meter diving board, but allows us to raise the bottom of the pool so we aren't holding and treating as much volume of water. So that's going to result in reduced operating costs. Same thing with the reducing of the roof height too, is going to also reduce the amount of air that we're going to heat and cool. We also talked and really studied closely about the locker room needs and how we can streamline that from going to 2 sets of locker rooms down to 1, maybe a little bit larger. So there's some cuts in there that they've also been able to look at. The big thing that they really wanted to hold on was the water. The water is the most important thing. So the rest of the things just add on. We also talked about reducing some deck space. So like around the pool, there's a certain amount of deck space. And rather than having 20 feet of deck from the edge of the pool to the exterior wall, we'll go 19 feet or maybe 18 feet. So it's not like we're going to cut gobs and gobs out. It's finding a little bit of money in a lot of places in order to be able to achieve the goal. Those are just a couple of the items I think that are pretty significant. One of them was to use solar heat to heat the pool, and then consider other sustainable strategies also. So that was some of the feedback that we used, and So OPN takes that information and they use that and formulate that into the schematic design that we're going to be seeing here in the next couple weeks.
Now, Jerry, you've also done this with other groups at the high school, right, in the planning?
Oh, yeah.
Can you describe some of the other groups that you've met with and talked about doing this process?
Science department, special ed, athletics, fine arts, regular classroom, or the gen ed. We also met with food service, with Chartwells, to be able to do that. So it's a matter of being able to get with each one of the separate user groups to compile all that information into the big project.
Okay, thank you.
The one thing I would like to say is I appreciate what Monique is saying, because I feel we're at a point now where our board has not had a thorough discussion of what does the high school experience look like for this program. We even had our principal come and talk about what that experience would look like with or without a swimming program. And there's a lot of opportunities we give our students at Ames High School, whether it's orchestra, band, athletics, there's ongoing list. The thing I appreciate her talking about is the need of protecting our general fund and how we're allocating educational resources to our students. So it's very warranted. I feel we have a lot more information now than we did back in December when the board first talked about wanting to move the initiative forward. So understanding what our commitment level is for that expense, I think is very important, and I feel we have a lot more information to make an informed decision.
I agree, yeah. I'm sorry, I just wanted to finish because I feel like you have actually been asking us as a board for months to sit down and have a conversation about our pain level or pain threshold, and we've never had it. I mean, people keep telling me we had this conversation and the information's out there. I'm pretty plugged in. I haven't been in the conversations and I don't know where the information is. And anytime we sit down and talk about the numbers, they always change. So that's my frustration, is that I don't like funny numbers, and I need to know how this makes sense for all of our children, and nobody can give me a straight answer, so.
But we did vote on, I agree with questioning, but we did have a vote on what our threshold was to pay. It was 75,000. We thought that, so there is a bottom line.
The district will only pay the only 75,000 for the upkeep. Right, is that what you mean?
Yeah,
okay.
That's what, so we voted on that, I mean, right
And
here.
so if the cost estimates come back that we're over 75,000, then we need to have a conversation about moving forward.
But the issue is the cost estimate won't include operating costs.
But that's what she's talking about. She said we voted for a $75,000 our pain limit. I don't recall this. I'm not saying it didn't happen, I just don't remember. 75,000 was what we voted was our pain threshold for operating costs. The annual cost that comes out of the general fund was 75. So I remember that conversation. I don't remember that we voted, but I remember that. I always remember that number, because that number was still higher than 50,000.
I think it was a consensus thing in the workshop, so I don't think we actually officially voted on it, but we all agreed that $75,000 out of our general fund was our limit.
And I think we got to that number based upon 75,000 from ACAC, 75,000 from the school district, and 25 from the city. And so splitting 150 to 200 for our project estimate was right in the middle, so it seemed reasonable.
Right. And again, I'll repeat, these are all these are guesstimates. They're not even estimates of what it's going to cost to heat, what it's going to cost to cool, what it's going to cost to the chemicals, what types of systems we're going to use with those. I mean, all of these things are based on no real numbers. So until we get the architects to say, okay, we're going to have this kind of a pool with this kind of a system, with this kind of a ventilating system, it's really hard to then calculate those operating costs. One of the things I remember when we visited the Lemar pool is that their architects and pool consultants had estimated their operating costs. And they said within their first 2 years, correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, but they said in their first 2 years, their operating costs were actually 75% or less than what was projected by their architects.
Jerry, do you anticipate that we will receive not only capital expense, but also potential operating expenses in this report?
I'm going to ask him about that,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
But you don't, so you weren't expecting that as part of what we would receive? That wasn't the expectation?
Well, they do an energy type of a model process for evaluating different HVAC systems for the building as part of the energy code. So I'm going to see if I can get just that section for the swimming pool to see what that energy consumption projection would be.
I have a question. What if those estimates are not high enough? What if the operating cost is more? Then we're on the hook for that money out of our general fund. So that's something that I just want to keep in the back of my mind, because we are bursting at the seams on our elementary schools.
And I appreciate what Director Rosser is saying. That's my point. I don't have any numbers. They've just been made up numbers. You know, one day it's $2 million, one day it's $2. I know the others making up numbers, right? We have a fiscal obligation to make decisions that protect the financial health of this district. We're being asked to potentially make an a vote on an initial expenditure of, I'm just going to say $20 million, and then obligating the district to somewhere between $75 million and $75,000 and $200,000 a year, and I don't know how we can be expected to make a vote on the schematic design in less than a month when nobody seems to have any real numbers.
Well, I think it's really unfair for you to continue to say 75 to 200,000. Mr. Deardorff, Director Deardorff, no, Mr. Deardorff.
Say a conservative number was 200,000.
Mr. Deardorff
Didn't you? I know I heard you say that. I've got ears.
Can you stop and, can I speak now?
Yes, you may speak now.
Thank you. He said, I'll repeat, correct me if I'm wrong, Director, but he said that would be split between the school district, the city, who's committed $25,000, and then ACAC, who is the only club in the entire state, let alone nation as I know, who has been asked by our school district to form a foundation of approaching, right now I think they've got commitments of $600,000 in it, and they're moving towards $1 million to protect the district in case the club were to dissolve. So that has been worked on for many, many years, and that club has come forward to back it up so that the school district isn't holding the bag in case they either, go under or, their enrollment for their club goes down for some reason. That way we're, as a district, held harmless. So that's been part of this whole game because of the fact that we've enjoyed a relationship with the city for over 40 years where we've been able to split the operating costs 50-50. Well, we weren't able to convince the city to continue to do that. We worked hard at that, but they've chosen to go their own way and build a separate facility. Now, we still want to involve them in this one. We've always kept the door open for them because the facility they're looking at building, the Healthy Life Center, will not accommodate all of their needs for lap swimming, for scuba diving. So they will need some access to our pool for those needs, but not to the extent that they currently utilize the municipal pool.
So if I could make a suggestion following up on what Luke had said, and kind of, I'm going to riff off what you had asked about the specific request for the 5th is, could we, Jerry, not necessarily have the perfect estimate numbers, but some conservative numbers, like Luke had said, maybe it's 200, maybe it's 220, maybe it's 180, whatever. Could OPN come with a conservative number for operations so on the 5th we can lay out for the community and for all of us those numbers you're talking about how much are we really saying the city is saying, how much are we saying, so that we can see what that pain threshold is.
And I think that's a great idea, Alan. And I guess I'd also recommend that come from administration because there's a lot of things that go into operating a pool that's beyond the scope of the project. So how do you manage it? There's other things that go into that. So having Spence and Superintendent Reisner provide a document to the board prior to the 5th to say, this is why we think it's a good idea, so we have that information as well, because we're all lay people up here, and so they're the ones having to manage the budget, prioritize to help us make an informed decision. So I think it's very appropriate that they also have a voice in that dialogue.
Because I agree that schematic design, at the end of schematic design, story construction is not going to have a solid estimate, really. You're going to have to get through full design before you can have all the value reductions and all of that. But we need to have that discussion sooner rather than later, because I would like to see the numbers, for example, before the vote on the 24th as well. So if we could do that for the 5th, does that seem reasonable, Jerry?
I think you made a good point. In order to be able to get, if you want an accurate estimate, we need to have accurate information. And right now we're in schematic design, so we haven't picked what type or size and pieces of equipment that we have. The energy modeling is something that occurs usually after the next phase. So I think I might have gotten in front of myself here when I misspoke earlier when I said that they would do that. Right now what we're going to be able to do is to base it on what facts and information we have now, which what we do have is our historical costs combined with what Linmar is. So at this point, reasonable numbers are, and it's not just the number that we pulled out of the air arbitrarily. We've used and gotten information from Linmar about what their utility and their chemical costs were. Then we adjusted that for the difference in electrical costs for Ames versus what Linmar is paying. So I think the numbers we have, they're reasonable. And at this point in time, this early on in this phase of the design, that's what we can expect.
Well, and if you're saying they're the best conservative estimates we can do right now, that's the best we can do. We can establish the pain threshold, and then when the full designs come in and we get the real numbers, that's when we check the two numbers and see, are we good here, or do we have to really think further? And I don't think there's a way to do better than that, is there?
Like Jerry said, come the 10th, we're not going to have any better number. The number we have today.
We could show the breakdown though, like the things Luke was talking about how we could.
Well, those are the breakdowns that we've had for a long time.
Where are these breakdowns?
Chris has.
I want to see them. Where are they?
So if I might, and we can provide this, I think the board's had this in work sessions before, but what Jerry was saying, when the original pool consultants was at Councilman Hunziger, which is not to be confused with the Ames Hunziger, or that they're a councilman on the city council, which is what I thought when I first heard that name. Our pool consultants were Councilor Hunziger and Councilman Hunziger. They came in and gave us these estimates for operating costs that we knew couldn't even be close. And then we found out they were throwing in the cost of insurance, and that doesn't come out of the general fund. They were putting in replacement estimates so that we could replace, they were building in depreciation into it. It wasn't true operating costs. And so those numbers were just all over the board and weren't anywhere in relation to what we had been experiencing within our pool. Our pool, for our half of it, has ranged every year depending on how severe the winter is, what happens with gas and electric rates, has ranged between $55,000 and $75,000 for our costs for the operating, not for the capital costs that Jerry pays out of PEPL, and we split with the city. So that's what we were going with for our old non-energy efficient pool. Knowing how much it costs. So when we went to visit Linmar, I sat down with their CFO, and I sat down and we went through all of their records on what they pay. And their total operating costs have been averaging around $123,000. One of the things that we discovered when we got their information is that their cost per kilowatt for electric is quite a bit lower than Ames. They've got I don't know if they're in some sort of cooperative with Alliant, but we buy our electric through the city of Ames, so we updated that. So when we added those in chemicals, they're $30,000. So of the $153,000 that we're estimating, $86,000 of it's electric. That's the largest cost on all of these models. So then they also spent an additional $22,000 for custodian. We estimated $15,000. So we're talking the difference of $145 million to $168 million between what their pool was and what we thought our Ames equivalent was for their pool, based on their volume, our water rates, and so forth.
Not,
the way it got up to 200 is
What's that?
everyone,
Jerry's saying that's not right.
not million, right?
153,000. What did I say? I'm sorry, I'm not used to working with these smaller numbers. So then when we reached that and we felt really good about the 153,000 of operating costs plus the 15,000 of custodian, which we've always also been splitting half with the city. Everybody was like, but the Councilman Hunziker numbers were so much higher. And so we went to 200,000 to provide some cushion in that number to be a little more conservative, saying, well, we don't want to spend more than 75,000, so we need to find the difference between 75,000 and 200,000. And that's where we started working with ACAC and potentially the city of Ames to try to make up that difference. So the numbers weren't made up. I mean, we did our best due diligence that we could based on an actual pool that's operating in Iowa, similar to what was expressed as a desire here. Whether it ends up that way or not after we're done designing, that will be a different conversation. But those numbers did come from somewhere. So that's where and that's how it ended up at 200,000. I still think 160, 170, somewhere in there is probably more realistic, but we did add the extra just so that we would not get 10 years down the line.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, Chris, let me interrupt you. Did you just say 160 to 170 is more realistic?
170, yeah, 153 for all the non-personnel, 15,000 for the custodian, so that's 168, so 170 rounding. So
a year, 170,000. I just want to. I'm writing it down.
But the pool itself now is costing 110,000.
But
we're just paying half of that because we have this agreement with the.
You're talking about the pool, but you're saying all of it, the whole shebang, right? The obligation to kind of maintain it and all of that. 170 is the number to use.
Out of our general fund.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to write it down.
Share.
Next meeting is going to be it's going to be 110. I'm going to write it down.
But that's not our share, that's not all of
I
it.
understand that.
Okay, I just
want to know what the number is. What's the number?
We've always said between 150 and 200,000.
I know, but Louis said we didn't say 200,000, so I just want to know what to write down.
I have always put 200,000 in my head because I'm going to be conservative, because I have the concern that what if we don't know.
Right.
So you can put 170,000. I'm still not going to go by that number. In my head, I still want to go by 200,000.
Tell me the number.
I'm going to have Chris email you the copy of this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then you have it and don't have to write it.
I appreciate, well, and I guess I just don't know how we can possibly be making informed decisions under these scenarios. That's really my concern. It's not pool versus no pool. It is, where is the information to make an informed decision of this magnitude related to the general fund?
Sure, and I think that's fair. So I've already emailed you the original documents from Dr. Taylor showing my 149. Again, I agree with Elisa, 200,000 is the number I've always gone off of. The thing to remember too is we're just approving schematic design. So if you think about it, if we get through, say it's November, and we say, this isn't the best interest of the district, really all the thing we've lost is time and money paid to the architect to develop those construction documents. So we still have to approve after DD, correct, Jerry? And so we still could, I won't say scrap, but postpone doing the pool if we don't think it's in the best interest. So really we're at stage 2 of a 3-stage process. And so, but we need to get this decision, and I'm really hoping the 10th is a culmination of all this.
Very good questions. Thank you for asking them. Very important other questions.
Yes, just a quick on the schematic design. Do you know what it's going to look like? I have a really hard time seeing, just the map. That's not how my brain functions. Do you have an idea how, we would see, I don't know, a box with the rooms separated? I mean, we would see something else for us to make a decision. I mean, would there be a presentation?
The design, I mean, the model, for lack of a better word, it's taken a lot more shape in the pictures. I don't know if they're to the point where they would actually build that 3D thing.
I think we could fly through and show it.
But there's some better pictures via whatever program they use that brought it into more of like a realistic shape.
Okay, great. I need that. I need that.
And they did-
The doors seem too narrow. I don't have the
Yes.
brain for that, so that's not what I do. So yes,
I know, I agree.
totally
For me,
use
that next
Thank
level
you.
helped a lot.
Okay, great, awesome.
Yeah, as far as the deliverables, they'll have a site plan which will show the basic shape of the building and where the parking's going to go.
Okay.
They won't have the sidewalks and all the details in yet, but again, it's kind of like falling through a funnel. We've got broad information, we're starting to work the details in until we get right down to the little details. They'll also have the floor plan with each level shown, and then they also need to provide exterior elevations. And they have, the tools that they have allow us to be able to take kind of a 3D look at the building as if you're.
That's what I need.
So that was really
Thanks,
helpful.
Karen.
And we'll start to get an idea of the shape of the building, how the roofs and the heights of the building look adjacent to each other. And we'll just kind of let them go. And they've got some really good information that they can provide. They'll be suggesting some start suggesting material types as far as where glass is going to be, or precast metal panels, but that's still that's still flexible and adjustable at this point.
Okay. And I want to see solar panels. I'm just throwing that out there.
We're working on the solar panels. Yeah,
cool.
we met last week and talked about sustainability. We went through a really broad range of sustainable and of options we want to be able to consider. We'll be able to report on that too.
Cool, thank you.
Other questions or concerns?
One question I have for the 10th a little bit is, the question I wanted to ask the last time they were here, but it doesn't lend itself well to them, is I want to know, do the teachers and staff and does Principal Evans think that it has everything they want, and what things may have been traded off, and are they okay with that? So for our meeting on the 10th, for example, could we have Principal Evans here
We'll make
to
sure,
discuss that type of thing?
Wait, don't we have a conflict? I think that's,
So let's talk about it.
we'll talk about it on the calendar when we get to that place, because we have just a minor conflict on that because it's homecoming week and the parade. And so I think we were talking about whether or not we were moving it one day back. So we can discuss
I would
that.
just like to have some
Certainly
sort of
be-
feedback
yes.
from,
Yeah.
because the previous one, OPN saying many great things and we're asking our questions, but the real user community wasn't there, so.
Yes, for sure.
What they've done is I think they call it reconnaissance. So we get the ideas, they put them down either in tabular form, which is the programming, and then we went back and visited with them. Redefine the ideas, and then they come back in a picture form or like a layout form. So then they've gotten that. So the teachers, this process isn't going to stop. It'll continue through the design, because what we want to do is basically continue to say, when OPN presents a drawing, says, is this what you meant when you said what you said? And so we'll be able to go through that and look at it, and we'll get to the point where we're going to look at room by room, wall by wall, door by door, window by window, furniture by furniture. So we need to be able to continue that interaction to be able to accomplish just what you're asking for.
And it's very appropriate for Spence to provide a report, but I've been very happy with OPN's dialogue with our staff. Every time they said they've gone back, they've talked again with department heads. And so Elise and I have had a lot more of those discussions, we know that, but having the whole board understand exactly what's gone into that development, I think is important.
Yeah, I think Spence will reiterate when he comes that it's the working relationship and the groups that they've met with and gone back, done things, gone back again. It's been phenomenal.
Well, and I don't know for the community meeting whether Spence will be able to be at that one, but yeah, I mean, I've heard Spence talk before about the high school and the need of it, and truthfully, I care more about that than I do about OPN talking about it, right? Because he can talk to the community about why and how, what it really impacts.
Yep.
We can make a request that he's there on the 5th. I don't exactly know who all will be there, so, but we will. Makes
Yeah, I'll
sense.
definitely
So,
talk
yeah.
with Spence about
Yeah.
that.
one thing that I wanted, I gave Jerry a list because one of the things that we came out of our work session was enrollment and whether we were focusing on the correct numbers. And I'm going to give you the best history on this as I recall it. Our facilities committee on the prior board went through and really studied this in terms of where our enrollment is and how big our high school should be. I realized that our board did not do, because of the timing of when the board switched over in this whole project, but I did want to, I came upon this when I was doing some work, and so I'll call your attention to, if you look at the bottom under high school, and this looks at, Jerry, if you could slide it to the left so that it could look historically. This starts in the late 80s, I think, yeah, 1985. So if you look at 1143, well, don't look at that number because I don't think that it was complete with, we've got to get to where does it, okay, so if you start to look at where our high school numbers went. So from 1143, we spike in the late 90s, so you can scoot over, I think it's 98 or 99, when we are at 1628. And I'm going to clarify, this is students in seats. So if you go to compare this to certified enrollment, you're really going to confuse yourself. So this is the number of bodies within that facility, and that's really what we're talking about. So 1600 in the late 1900s, and then if you keep going over, so 1628 was our high point, and that's when we start then to have a decrease, and then you'll start to then see where we are today, which is now with a little increase up to 1387 of last fall, and from what I understand, we may be at 1400 now. So in terms of when we look at having this building built for 1600 in our academic areas and 1800 in the general spaces, does this information help you feel comfortable with those number estimates? Because that number makes a difference in a month or two when we're already into it. We need to know that we're comfortable with these numbers. And is there additional information you need to feel comfortable with those numbers?
The numbers that worry me aren't these numbers. They're the numbers for 3rd grade and 5th grade, right? So I think as we talk to these numbers, I would be very interested to see the administration and Superintendent Reisner talk about where you think these numbers might be in 10 years, you know? Because as we see, Ames has gone up and down historically. And I think from our work session, that was kind of the place we were that I think Director Colton brought up too.
Yeah. So definitely, Chris and I can work together on putting a projection together for the next, 12 plus years.
If we age advance people.
If we'll just roll up and kind of factor in what our trend has been.
The one thing to remember too, though, we have a lot more enrollment at elementaries than our middle school and high, because grad students typically have younger kids. They go through Iowa State, they graduate, they have to leave. So I'd be careful rolling it straight up, because historically that hasn't been accurate. So I'd use these numbers as a benchmark to figure out where we. So I think looking at the high school specifically is a better indicator than necessarily looking at elementary, but maybe comparing the two, how they relate would be helpful.
Yep, we can do that.
I think a number, we were talking before the meeting, a number that for me would be helpful on this document would be a total enrollment for our elementary, because you see in bold we have middle school and we have high school, but we don't have total elementary. So to look at that trend line together as we're watching those high school enrollment numbers, also with where our elementaries have been and where we are today, would be, I think, helpful for us.
I think that would paint a clearer picture in terms of projecting where we're going to be, because I've got it open, the first day numbers, those preliminary numbers, and that's 2139 total elementary. So I think it would be a much clearer picture to be able to trend that out as well.
Yes, we can do that.
And the way the schematic design is, the classrooms are, I think it would help me to see how much it would be to add, let's say, if we were to add 4 more students, 8 more. Wouldn't they, like 8 classrooms, a pod sort of thing, the purple ones? and if we added more classrooms, I would like to see where that would put us. Because if we could add 8 more classrooms now, I mean, why wouldn't we do it now when we're spending $100 million on a building instead of, I'm 1,600 does not make me comfortable. There's just something about it, I don't know.
The operating cost is the trade-off, so it takes more to heat that square feet, within that building. So I'd be cautious about wanting just to make it bigger. It'd be cheaper now than 5-10 years down the road. It's just that then we have to heat it, cool it, and spend more money on the general fund. So it's just this balance. When Spence was paramount in helping finalize the 16 and 18 number, and he really landed on 18 for the common space because we could allow for expansion by not having to actually pay for the academic.
Yeah, we started talking about this number well over a year ago. Well, yeah, definitely more than a year ago, like 2 years ago. And this was the number that was discussed with the high school staff, with the facilities committee. Spent many meetings discussing this number. Previous board members talked about it, and I'm comfortable with it, mostly because of the fact that we've made the conscious decision in those common areas that it would cost more, the auditorium, the cafeteria, the certain gymnasiums and such. It'd be very difficult to add on and costly to add on later on. And those we're building, upscaling a little bit right now. But the academic classes, the academic wing, like we did with our elementaries, we designed them, and we're designing the high school too, in such a way that we can add on those academic areas as the school population increases.
And that's the bit that I'm worried about, because to me it's not ideal to finish a building and 2 years later have to add to it. That's just,
yeah, 2 years. I think we're safe with that. But it's very important. The last thing that Director Durdorf noted was factoring that in was the cost of operating. We've seen, and this is a big mistake that other high schools have made in other states and even in Iowa, that they'll build a high school bigger, thinking, well, better build it now because it's going to cost us more later. Well, then they're saddled with these quite heavy energy costs to keep it heated and cool it or whatever else down the road. And that, as Jerry can attest to, is a very serious investment, and that chews up more of your general fund actually than anything else.
Well, maybe one thing OPN can clarify is, in my head, when I see the 1,600 and the 1,800 number, I don't know what that means to the students if we're at the 1,600 number for what we build and there becomes 1,650 students. I doubt that's a hard number. What do they think are the hard numbers? Because that would give me more comfort for this, because you're right, there's overhead costs, things like that. But understanding, what is the hard limit number instead of the comfortable number.
And I think too, this is another area that would be good to have Spence here when we talk about numbers, because of the way that the classrooms are going to be designed and the way that they're planning on doing the scheduling so that it's much more flexible in terms of, not flexible classrooms, Monique, I know we've had that discussion, but more flexible in terms of teachers and where their home base and that type of thing is. I think it maximizes, and so that number becomes a much softer number, and Spence can talk about that as well when he comes. So we can do both, do the projections, and then also have Spence talk a little bit about what he plans to do with the schedule and the classrooms.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions or concerns for staff? This is helpful because this provides our staff some time and some direction to go back so that they can come back and answer some questions. So thank you very, very much for bringing things up, because it's very important for the part of the conversation as we move forward. Is there any comments from the public? Just will you? We would love to hear from you, but what we need is we need you to come forward, give your name and address, Yeah, come on up. We're not scary. We know there's a table and there's a microphone, but that's just so that we can hear you. So just state your name and address and then give us your comment. And just so you know that it's a comment and then it will not be a dialogue between us. So go ahead.
Ashley Ripke, 2310 North.
I can't hear you. Can you scoot up?
Ashley Ripke, 2310 Northwestern. That was interesting to me hearing that dialogue. I hadn't heard the numbers of the student numbers for the proposed high school, but it kind of, talking about the enrollment stuff and then hearing that number and then Jemette's comment was one that was kind of going through my head because we are only like 3 years into these elementary schools that we're already going to be maybe building onto. And so, like as a parent of kids that would eventually maybe be at that high school, I'm like, oh crap, are we going to be doing this again at that stage too? So that just, maybe that's not a bad thing to continue talking about. But
great, thank you. We appreciate you sharing.
Thanks, Ashley.
Jenny Coffey, 4257 Eisenhower. I am a teacher at Sawyer. I just wanted to say, thank you very much, those of you that are bringing up a lot of questions. I know it makes for a hard discussion. It's kind of frustrating when you've been talking about it for well over a year. But as a teacher, I really appreciate that you're still looking at the numbers. I know especially anytime when we're doing something with the general fund, as a teacher, I just want to make sure that it's something that's really good for all of our students. And I'm really pleased to see that there's a public forum coming up, because I know in talking to mom friends and other parents of my students, there's a lot of different ideas about what's going on with the pool. Some people are thinking it's the same situation as we have now, where the city's covering half of it, and I know they're going to cover some of it, but it's not as much as they used to, and that maybe this public will get to use the pool a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be this as much as it was before. But I have some friends who are quite sure that they're going to get to take their kids to the high school pool for swimming lessons, and others who are saying, no, I think it's really not even all the high school students, just the swim team and then the other team that's going to help pay for it, using it, and not all of the high school. So, and I get that when we build the pool, that money's not coming out of the general fund, but a big, whether it's 75,000 or more, that's still a big chunk of the general fund, and it's just, I want to know that it's something that's helping everybody in the district, and that we're not going to run into problems down the line. So I just appreciate, and I know it's frustrating to have the same conversations over and over, but as a teacher and as a member of the community, I really appreciate you actually asking those questions and trying to get some clarity, because just from my conversations with the public, I don't think there's a lot of clarity for them either, and they haven't been in on any of those conversations. So the more clear we can be before we present it to them, I think the better that will go. So thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. Thank both of you for bringing your comments to us. Any other comments?
Hi, Amy Edwards, 1204 Arizona Ave. And again, I too appreciate this conversation. I think a question to you, and maybe this is something that has already been in the works, in the planning. How are we working or gathering data on our housing building? Obviously, Ames is continually putting up more apartments, and I don't necessarily think they're all for college students or college families. I think we just have a lot of families that's more affordable. And when we're looking in our area in West Ames, there are lots of big pockets of houses that are going up. How are we generating that data and then looking at that to in turn say, what is our enrollment going to look like for our elementary buildings? Because I think it's obviously an indicator, but I don't know what work's been done previously or currently with you or previous school boards. And I really think that's an important part of the conversation that eventually will lead you to a high school number, but I really think back to our elementary numbers. There are a lot of houses that are going up. Families are going to come in, they're going to buy, they're going to want to send their kids to our elementaries. And some maybe are more landlocked than others, and I really hope that maybe that could be just a part of your conversation in a work session, that data and that information is being looked at in conjunction to these other pieces. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Amy. Any other questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the consent items.
Move to approve as consent.
Second. Moved by Deardorff, seconded by Binkin.
The consent items are minutes from the meetings held August 13th, 2018, Claims and payroll for 2018, Exhibit C1. Personnel report, Exhibit C2. Open enrollment, Exhibit C3. Gifts to the district, Exhibit C4. And contracts and agreements, Lutheran Services of Iowa, a lease for classroom space, and Child Serve for one-to-one nursing services. And if I can go back to the gifts to the district. One donor was John Larson and Company, also St. Paul Lutheran Church.
Thank you. It's been moved by Deerdorf, seconded by Bacon. All those all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Action items.
I move the board approve the 2018-19 retirement incentive for employees policy as presented.
I second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion.
At the last meeting, I asked if we could reach out to the Ames area, the Ames Teachers Association, to find out regarding their input regarding this, and I was just wondering if we had a report regarding that.
Yes, I sent an email to Eileen the Wednesday after the board meeting when we were back from our training. She did have some questions, which I clarified. Probably the main concern that they expressed, and I believe the policy is written to be as flexible as possible for administration, is if we have no student days that move into June, that would cause us to need teachers to actually teach students, that we could continue our policy of allowing them to be done in May. The main reason this counts is that whatever the month after the last physical working day of their career is when their IPERS check starts. So if their last physical working day is in May, their IPERS check would start in June. If they go one day into June, their first IPERS check is in July. So far, we have not had weather that has caused us to have student days go into June, but that's always a possibility.
Don't say that.
So we did write the policy that just clarified that they're expected to work their contracts. That doesn't mean that administration doesn't have the ability to allow them out of their contract if that works for everybody involved. But it was just putting in policy what's law. They're required to work their contracts anyway. I mean, so they would always have to have permission to get out of them early. So I did let her know that. Students are done, I believe, on May 31st this year, so hopefully good weather.
Yeah. So hope for good weather, and also the administration still is going to maintain that flexibility to work on an individual basis with retirees if something arises.
And not everyone wants to be done in May. Some of them work those days, and they may be taking their IPERS later because of experience, because it's by quarter and so forth. So
overall, they were comfortable with the policy change?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, it's been moved by Perez, seconded by Beerbaum. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Items from the board.
I'd like to say something. I want to acknowledge that it's the beginning of a brand new academic school year. And I love it. I love this time of year. I think particularly in Ames, the town is just abuzz with excitement. And every new school year is unique because it's really an opportunity for a new beginning for everybody. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity and say to our students, our families, our staff, and our administration, I hope you have a fantastic, wonderful school year.
I piggyback on that. One of my favorite days of the whole year is the Teacher Appreciation Breakfast. And I love going to it, first and foremost, to thank our teachers and our staff in our buildings. It's wonderful to see them come back from summer vacation energized. And I'm always I'm fascinated, and I feel so blessed to have such good staff in our district, because first and foremost, they care about kids. and it comes through wholeheartedly when I see them that Monday morning. And again, I appreciate everyone coming out for that. It's a great event, and it should be a great year.
It's interesting you said that's one of your favorite days, because one of my favorite days is that first day of school, seeing the kids get out of school and come across the playgrounds and just see their parents. Like, that's something I missed for 3 months, and I love seeing it now. So I highly recommend, if you haven't seen it, go to one of the elementary schools and watch all the kids come out. It's the greatest thing ever.
Alan, it's been a few years since I've seen my youngest sister is a sophomore at the high school, so those days are gone. So enjoy them while you can. So yes, thanks to all the teachers and staff in getting another wonderful year started off. It's great. Fall is a wonderful time. It's a renewing for the teachers, renewal opportunities, new beginning for all the students. It is a really neat time of year. So thank you for that. I do want to report real quick on a couple weeks ago, the Iowa Association of School Boards Legislative Resolutions Committee, which I'm a member of, we met, if you recall, a couple meetings back. We voted on some resolutions to pass on in the process. We have some results now. That committee took all of the results from various school districts throughout the state, and we have proposed that at our November meeting, we will suggest that the SAVE resolution be moved forward as our top legislative priority. The resolution related to mental health care for youth be our number 2 priority. The supplemental state aid, of course, that resolution be the number 3 priority, and I shouldn't be saying third because these aren't in necessarily any priority order. And then school funding policy, and specifically we're talking about the equity questions within school funding policy around the state. So those are the 4 that we're going to suggest that we focus on, and we at our conference will vote on those 4 and make that final decision. This committee just recommends them. So also that morning we had the opportunity to interview the 2 gubernatorial candidates, the Governor Reynolds and her opponent Fred Hubble. They spent about a little over an hour with the committee, and if you haven't received the email link, have you received it yet? Did you receive it this week? Okay, maybe I just did to preview it, but you will, as board members, for all school board members throughout the state, will be receiving a video. It was videotaped. There were a set number of questions. They each were given ample time to answer them, and so that will be available to you. Like I said, I probably should be out next week. Maybe they just sent it out to the committee members to preview, and that's possible, but it will be going out to you as well to look at what their stances are on the various educational issues that were important to Iowa schools.
I just want to echo the comments about the beginning of the school year and the staff appreciation breakfast. It is, I love it. It is one of my favorite. It does battle graduation though, because it is really awesome watching our high school principal embrace all of our students. But it is always great to see all of the staff and to be able to stand in front of all of them. I too feel so blessed for my kids, because it is just awesome when you can sit up there and you can see the faces and you can see the expressions and know that they are all very excited for the year to come. I really appreciated the speaker on equity literacy. Fantastic. Really could have listened to him even longer, and I know that there were some small sessions, small breakout sessions with him, but I appreciate that you all kicked our year off in such a positive manner and just really embracing the message that he provided. I think another thing that I will add that we haven't had a lot of board committee reports on our agendas, but we will now. We have not letting Jenny or Amy get comfortable too long, because we're going to start rolling into, or any of our staff really getting rolling into some of our committee work. And I know I've seen some emails go by of some that are getting scheduled. So some of that work will start to pick up speed with the school year beginning. So thank you all for all you're doing to get us there. So how about items from the superintendent?
Great start, definitely a great start to the school year. And one of the things I really want to do is commend our directors, our teachers, our principals, our maintenance, the busing people, just across the board. It is really difficult for people to start with a new superintendent when they've had one for the number of years that they had the previous one. And so I just appreciate all of the open dialogue that we were able to have. It's definitely, this place is amazing, and the opportunities for us to continue to grow and work together are just really exciting for me. So I know that right now a lot of the directors and principals are feeling really tired, and I am so thankful that they kind of pushed hard right towards the start of school. So thank you all. We'll kind of slow down just a little, just a little. And then I wanted to introduce Amy Lane. Amy is our new, and I'm not going to say Director of Student Services. I accidentally said that at the back to school, and Anthony's like, well, I guess I'm now the maintenance, the Director of Facilities. So
there we go.
Amy's our Curriculum and Instruction Director, and we have been meeting a lot. Weekends, long hours, and trying to kind of grapple with some of the work that's already been done in the district and how we lay out plans that really take us to where we want to be. That kind of brings up Wednesday night. We're going to have a work session with our directors and administrators to kind of talk about where do we want to be as a district? And so what are some of our broad goals as a board? And those goals are hopefully broad enough that it will give principals and directors an ability to work within their buildings on the implementation. So we will do that on Wednesday night. Amy and I have also been visiting, and I'm sure the other directors as well. I just know because I rode in her car and got car sick. I just didn't tell her I was really car sick. She's not a good driver. So we visited the first day of school. We visited a lot of classrooms and didn't make it to every classroom, but we're in a number of buildings. I know she's continued to do some building visits, and I have as well. And just a reminder to the board, my structure is I meet with the principals individually for about an hour. And that's about once a month, and then I go into the classrooms for a couple hours after that. So today I met, Sue's here, so I went to Sawyer, and I met with Sue. We had great discussion, and then went into some classrooms, and the teachers were doing amazing things with their students, and it was fun to get to be in there. So, and I didn't make it in every classroom, but I will get there for sure. I wanted to also point out that Anthony, Lisa, and I went to a city council work session, and it was a joint work session with us and Iowa State, and we were talking about equity and what does that look like for our community as a whole, and what are the things that each entity is doing, and how do we bring it all together. And so later this, next month, I think the end of next month, there's a workshop that we'll be attending along with, I think Iowa State is there as well, but it's the city council members, us, and some other business partners. So it's exciting to get that collaboration together and to know that our whole community is talking about a common focus. We will keep participating. And that's all I have until we go to the calendar.
So let's go ahead and go to the board planning calendar.
So just to kind of make sure we have everything right, Wednesday night, so that's this Wednesday, we do our work session. That starts at 5:30. I'm sorry, I'm fumbling for the calendar and not seeing it. And then after that, I believe we then have that community forum September 5th. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. Then we need to discuss September 10th. So September 10th would be that work session around kind of update with OPN and the items, answering some of the questions that we had. If I'm right, September 10th is the parade for homecoming.
Correct.
Thank you. So I know that we try to avoid that from my understanding if we can. It sounds like the last few years we have not been able to avoid it. My only concern with having a board meeting on the night of an event like that is I don't want people that want to be here not to be able to be here because they're watching their kids or whatever participate in a parade. So that's an open discussion for you all to have and talk about if you want to move that.
Well, and it sounds like there's an interest from all of us to have Spence Evans, our principal, and I don't think that it's fair to pull him from that. So I guess in my mind, the options would be move it earlier, move it later, or move it to a different night. So does anyone have any opinions?
I think the other concern I would have not only is those individuals you're talking about, and I'm not going to talk about myself, I'm talking about parents who might have, children involved in those activities not being able to come to our board meeting that do want to be here for those discussions. So could we move it to the 11th? Is that an option?
Jerry, I believe we talked with OPN and they said yes, they could be here the 11th. So we could move it to the 11th if that worked for the board.
But we're still having a board meeting that day.
No, it would be the board meeting along with that work session on the 11th.
Okay.
Yeah. That works for me.
What's that, Jerry?
I just want to be clear.
Yep, okay.
Yes. Board meeting and work session would
So to be clear,
move.
this would be a work session and a board meeting. We would move the whole thing to a Tuesday night, which is unique for us to have a Tuesday night board meeting.
Sure. And then I'll throw out one other question. If that work session is more than just a presentation, if we get into a lengthy discussion, do we want to flip-flop the meeting with the work session? That way we're not running into what happened before where we had a work session and then people come, expect the meeting to start, and we're still in our work session. That's not being nice to people's schedules. So
I would
what do you
agree with
think?
that one, especially for this specific work session, because although we've said we can try to stay on schedule on a work session, this one, if we have a discussion going over, I don't think we should cut it short.
I agree. I mean, we've discussed the pool for over an hour tonight, so yeah, I could totally see flipping them.
Would you still start at 6:30?
No, we could still start at 5:30.
So so I want to make sure I'm clear, starting the board meeting at 5:30, followed by, and then the work session would follow that whenever we complete that board meeting.
Correct.
I'm seeing nods of affirming this. Okay.
Yep, I'm okay with it.
Okay, alrighty. So so a note for everyone, the next school board meeting will be September 11th at 5:30 p.m., of which we will then follow with a work session with OPN and Story Construction. Great, thank you.
And so just a couple more things about the calendar. One of the things that I know has been asked for by the board is the bus report. And I believe, do we have the final draft? Okay, so Chris and I will work on setting up a session for that, because I know that's something that several of you have asked me to get set up, so we will work on that, Chris. And then the other thing is that just to keep in mind that probably as we roll into October, mid to late October, we'll start having more discussions around the enrollment process for next year.
Great.
All right.
Thank you. Lots of things to discuss, but some really positive things as we're moving forward. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Bankin. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thank you.